Good morning, this is the Eager Beaver Show.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning and hello, kids, and welcome to, season 4 and episode number 64 of the True North Eager Beaver Interview Project, also known as episode 541 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show, here on the Cryo Media Network. Yeah. Today, recording day, is Monday, December 23rd, 2024. It's actually the afternoon right now over here where we are, but this is for broadcast tomorrow, Mr. Grizzly? Tomorrow.
Yes.
So Tuesday, December 24th, Christmas Eve, kids and cubbies. I hope you've all been good. Of course, you've all been good. You know that. So you're going to be very, very, very well treated this year, hopefully, if you are observing, that is, of course. I am your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver A, and with me, as always, is my good friend, Mr. Grizzly. I have no idea what kind of day it's going to be at the Beaver Lodge, but hey, it's Christmas Eve, so it's going to be a good day.
Well, we're getting 10 to 20 centimeters of snow, and if you can hear in the background, I'm going to have to mute my mic frequently because they're doing more construction in the building, and all I hear is hammer drills all day long, which is not conducive to actually getting work done, because I have some production to do, some narration to do, and a couple of music shows I wanted to record, but that's going to have to wait till this evening after I do my ASMR. So I will just hand the mic over to you, sir, and mute for the next little bit until we bring our guest in.
Okay, so am I to guess that's an indication of how your mental health is doing today?
Yep.
Okay. Kids and cubs, we have a treat for you today. This is someone that we've wanted to have on the show for quite a while, and we actually had reached out a while ago and got a yes, and then as you know, we had a couple of curveballs thrown our way this year. But now that we've handled those, we had time to follow up with guests that had said yes previously. And the timing really could not be better, actually, at this moment. Our guest is the Chief Executive Officer of the APMA. And if you don't know, that's the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. And that organization's mission is to promote and strengthen the Canadian automotive supply chain, both domestically and internationally. Now, as you know, kids and cubs, things having to do with cars have been in the news a lot lately, not only with the obvious thing, NAFTA and tariffs and whatnot, but also EV batteries, also, fuel standards, all that kind of stuff. So, cars are, it's a big subject these days, but it's going to,
right?
yes, exactly. But it is going to get even bigger as we start negotiating and tariffs come up. And if this trade negotiation goes from a review to an actual renegotiation, a lot of things will be on the table. And our guest, well, the last time around was in the room when it happened. He worked closely with officials in Ottawa, Washington, and Mexico City during the 2017 to 2019 NAFTA renegotiations and led the effort to secure an unprecedented increase in regional content for suppliers in the new USMCA. In 2022, he was named to the Ontario Premier's Council on U.S. Trade and Competitiveness. He's a sought-after voice by leading global publications, including The Economist, New York Times, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNN, everyone. And he speaks frequently on industry issues at the House of Commons standing committees in finance, industry, and trade. Kids and
And
cubs.
he was kind enough to lend some time to just a couple of punks in Canada.
2 days before Christmas.
Yeah.
So
this is the kind of guy we're dealing with. This is a good guy.
Put your paws up and give a big round of applause to the Chief Executive Officer of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, Mr. Flavio Volpe. Welcome to the Beaver Lodge, sir.
Hey, you guys do some great work. I'm going to add this podcast to that bio because
thanks so much.
You come highly recommended. I'm very happy to be on.
Oh, thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. High praise indeed.
Yeah, considering that we when we get compliments and criticism, we consider the source. So thank you. Very flattered indeed. Before we start, we ask all our guests, how's your mental health doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. That snow is, I don't have to shovel it. So
you seem like you got
boys now. I got a grown boy. Push the shovel. We're fine now.
You seem like you got a cool, chill vibe going on.
Yeah,
I like it.
Okay. That's how I am. That's how I am, and that's how you guys are. So,
good stuff.
I like to think so.
Somebody told me, I said, how's this podcast going? It's going to be just a nice hug, and it's funny, but it feels like that. So,
cool. We like that.
Oh my God.
We want to make people come in and feel welcome. Sure. It's really key. It's like you come in and feel welcome. We're going to have a chat. We neither one of us are journalists, right? So we don't do gotcha because we don't believe in that. Yeah. It's like, let's just have a nice conversation. Three fellas sitting around, chewing the chaw, I'll say.
It's funny that you say that because I think we're even past the gotcha era. Because gotcha used to be like, I'm going to get you on, I'm going to pull the truth out of you.
Yeah.
Now we're not interested in the truth. Now we're like, let me just tell you what you should be thinking. Yeah,
that's kind of how it is these days, right?
Or, I'm talking to you now. Let me tell you what you said.
Yeah.
Before we get into like the whole meat of it, though, because you're more than just, NAFTA negotiations and stuff, but the whole labor movement. What was your draw to it? How did you get into that?
Well, I'm on the employer side of the business, and but I work very closely, and we worked very closely through the NAFTA negotiations with the labor side of it. And so sometimes, you can't really see the difference between the two because in Canada, we don't have a Canadian automaker, so we're all kind of fighting for those opportunities. It's really unique. Suppliers working with tool makers, working with labor, working with government to kind of let's just go on. It's kind of a constant Team Canada. I worked in government in another job at the Queen's Park for the Minister of Economic Development when the world fell apart in 2009 and 2010. And our big file was the auto restructuring. That's the nice words we use, the bailouts. Should we invest lots of public money in saving companies that a lot of people said, well, they just mismanaged the business and why is that the taxpayer's problem? Well, we got a real look under the hood and discovered there were hundreds of Canadian suppliers that employed 100,000 people that we owed a debt to. And in government, we made that decision, and then I left government to go do something else. And these guys called me, and I'm a real car nut. So I thought this was a car job. And it turns out to be an auto job. And the difference is, this isn't about auto enthusiasm, but enthusiasm for automotive. So here I am.
Okay. Okay.
Well, so I've been following you on the Twitter for a while, and I've really appreciated a lot of the things that you've had to say when it comes to responsibilities of government, of labor, of companies, of like you seem to be a down to earth, straight shooter, which I really do appreciate. And then of course a year ago, was it 2 years ago now? Project Arrow was debuted, and that immediately I'm like, Project Arrow about the Avro. Oh shit! So Arrow. That's a song to me. My father was Air Force. He was an a jet engine specialist. He taught jet engine theory. So as soon as I hear Project Arrow, I'm in. And I'm looking at launching Arrow 2.0. And I understand that you're going to build a fleet of those to sort of debut some of the technology that's helped to have been improved with the first one. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, I was inspired by the same thing you're talking about. We launched this Project Arrow, and Canadians across the country started sending me, well, either deriding me on what we used to call Twitter to say, hold on, you're going to name a project with national ambition against maybe the highest profile failure against ambition?
It wasn't a failure.
Right.
It was
canceled. Or all the people who sent me stuff like this, and I said, sure. Do you know what, for me, the Avro Arrow was, what could Canadians do when they were given a clean sheet?
Yeah,
we went
exactly.
Twice as high, twice as fast. And like I said in the opening, we don't have a Canadian car company, and we haven't had one. With all apologies to Malcolm Brickland and his 2 years in Nova Scotia, we haven't had one since McLaughlin Buicks 100 years ago in Oshawa. And we said, I get really involved in the trade negotiations. We did with TPP, where the main partner was Japan, and then NAFTA, of course, the main partner being the U.S. We're at the final strokes of the automotive rules negotiations. The countries that had automakers could put their thumb on the scale. And I thought, what could we do to change the channel for Canada? Even though we're the world's 10th or 11th biggest automaker as a jurisdiction, but all the Canadian companies are suppliers. So we said, okay, what if we could, we had this long-running theory here. We do everything end to end. Well, what if we designed our own car and put all Canadian technology on it, and then showed the world that you can transition to electric, connected, autonomous drive using Canadian people in innovation and companies. And so we did it, and it was a bigger success than I thought it. First of all, my hair was here when we started it. I lost a lot by promising that we are going to the CES Consumer Electronics Show on January 6, 2023. I said that on January 7th, 2020.
Holy shit.
And
you made it.
I must have been asked 1,000 times, are you going to make it? I said, we're going to make it. Now in here, it was like the duck on water.
Yeah.
So we did make it. We told the story differently, and I think humbly kind of recast how the auto business thought about Canada, and then also in some part recast how Canadians think about the auto business. Yeah, we do have some Canadian brands and some Canadian technologies, Canadian personalities. Right. And it was the auto parts business that bailed out Canadian healthcare in the first wave of the COVID pandemic, when we were short on everything, ventilators and all the PPE. And, we let a call here for the manufacturer said, look, if you remember, we all thought we were going to die in that first term, like, right? It was, Tom Hanks and his wife got sick. I thought we were going to lose Tom Hanks here.
Yeah.
And right around that time, we said, okay, look, if I can get you the specs and the volumes, are you willing to convert, at least in the short term? 165 companies put their hands up.
Oh, wow.
77 did it. And in that moment, I think we restored in people's minds the dignity in making things. And so Arrow was an extension of that. Is there a dignity in making things? Damn it, there is. You need it sometimes. You can't just buy everything from China. And then number two, well, the things that you make, what are the most complicated and technically advanced, technologically advanced and exciting products? It's got to be whatever goes in a car. And so we had a great global tour, but we're going to do it again. You're right. We're going to build another 6 maybe 12, and we're going to update that tech because I made everybody give me their 2025 tech. It's now obsolete. We're going to go for 28, 29, and 30.
Fantastic. Now, I know that there's nobody technically lined up to put this car into production at this time. Is that something we could see at some point, do you think?
Let me give you the humble answer on this. The biggest debate in automotive right now is how's the West going to hold back the Chinese?
Because BYD has got some really crazy vehicles, right?
Well, it's two things. It's you solve for technology and then you solve for price. Right. We can match anybody for technology, and so can the Germans and the Japanese. We can't
match for price.
We can't match for price. Now, some of that is going to be recast. And today, the biggest story in the news, I just did a hit for a national news broadcast on Honda and Nissan coming together. So the West is reacting, restructuring. We've got tariffs on Chinese product. We're going to hold them back. And my hope on the Aero isn't necessarily that there's a car company. My hope is that it's going to inspire people to think bigger in Canada. And it might be major systems that come out of this. It might be that we just inspire somebody who sees the car with mobile capital to say, okay, well, I think Canada needs this or something like that in their industry. The one thing we are missing in Canada vis-a-vis our competition, and we live in a wonderful country, but I don't know that we have a national ambition that when it comes to this stuff.
I think that kind of died in 1959 to a large degree, right?
Yeah.
On Black Friday, when
I'm going to show you a picture. Okay, you talk about 1959. I'm going to show you 1986. Okay, and I only say it. I say this humbly because I think this is a story that lots of people have. My father wasn't necessarily a car guy. He didn't really care too much about it, but he indulged me. And I'm 10 years old, and I said, I got to see the Ferrari Testarossa at the Toronto Auto Show. He's like, what am I doing here? We get down there. He talks the guy behind the stanchion into letting me sit in the car. I thought the guy was Enzo Ferrari. I mean, it turns out he was a guy named Remo Ferri who sells the Ferraris here in Toronto. And for 35 years, I was looking for this picture, but I found it. There's me.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I tell you, that moment was, God, I got to be in. Whatever it is, whoever makes these things, whatever they're doing, I got to do this. When we brought the Aero to the Toronto Auto Show, it was the 50th anniversary auto show, Canadian International Auto Show. It was the first time in the 50 years where the headline car was a non-automaker car. We opened the curtain at the beginning of the media day, 400 journalists there, and somebody says, can I buy one? I said, yeah, that one was $20 million. And they go, you're going to launch a car company? I said, well, when I was 10, I came here, and a car, this chance meeting kind of changed my trajectory. Somebody's 20-year-old is going to see the Aero and say, no, we're going to solve for cost. And I want to be a car maker. And everything that we put in this is for whoever that inspires. We solve for technology. I can't solve for cost. Someone else will.
Well, you're absolutely right, because there's going to be the dreamer out there somewhere that's going to see it. And like you say, that moment in time changed the direction of your life.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, somebody who was there for that moment in time, it's been a life-changing situation for them. Now, we might not see it for a few years, but somebody's going to come along and say, well, this was my moment. And they'll talk about it. And it's going to happen. And like you say, it's, since 1959, we've kind of lost our creative drive to a certain degree. When they killed the Aero, it killed a lot of ambition in this country. And of course, we all know about the brain drain and how they either went to Lockheed Martin or they went to NASA. The reason they put a man on the moon in 1969 was because of Canadian engineers from Avro. The reason the SR-71 Blackbird was built was because of Canadian engineers from Avro. If you look at the cockpit, it's basically the Avro Aero's cockpit. I mean, this was all Canadians who did this.
You know your stuff. And you know your stuff because it's material. It's dramatic. We live in a great country. I mean, whatever a non-Twitter objective listing you see, peace and prosperity and goodwill and health, we're always ranked in the top 2, 3, 4. But people, when I travel the world, they say to me, "Tell me a Canadian brand." And I usually don't rise to that challenge. We've got a lot of Canadian brands, but I understand what they're saying to me is that the world associates countries with iconic tourist destinations, cultural assets, singers, dancers, movie stars, sports
we have
teams.
all of that.
Yeah, or consumer brands.
We don't have.
Yeah, but we've got 41 million people that can afford other people's consumer brands because we built something right here. But I understand that challenge, and part of that is that it's kind of like small p politics around the world, and we should do better by that. The last time we had something so Avro-ish was BlackBerry.
I was thinking just that.
Yeah, research.
That's the last brand I can remember.
Yes.
I mean, they took over the world.
It did. And it was all manufactured in Canada too, until they came out with what was the clickable touchscreen.
Yeah.
And that was what basically killed the company. They went to China, and at the time, China was like, now everything's made in Shenzhen, and it's your phone's good. But back then, it wasn't. And it was Mike,
Lazaridis.
Thank you, Lazaridis, who did not want to go to China for manufacturing because they didn't have the quality controls that we have in Canada. And that was his take on it in Canada and the U.S. because they were manufactured on both sides of the border. But, I mean, it's certainly changed since then because that's 2008. That's quite a while ago.
Yeah. In my early days in government, I was there for 4 years. I was there from 07 to 11, Queen's Park here in Toronto. And research in motion was, if the guys at RIM showed up, you listened. They were doing things that nobody else was on the global stage, which wasn't just about profit and loss, because we've had a lot of companies do very, very well. They're about defining a space and then tearing a hole in the time-space continuum to smartphone. And they made a couple of mistakes, like what you're talking about, but also not believing in the consumer side of the market, and then being beaten to the app business by their competitors. Mostly Apple, but also Samsung copying Apple, Samsung getting sued, Samsung losing that case, but still getting 30% of the market. And we talk about BlackBerry like it's another historic case, and it is. Part of this is about being a small country from a population point of view. Part of it is that to a large degree, we're an extension of a North American culture. At least urban centers share that. Rural Canada may be a little bit different, but not much. Quebec, of course, being terribly unique. But, the urban experience of a New Yorker is not much different than one of Toronto.
Right.
We're a little safer. They're a little sexier, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But you can appeal to the same consumer. And you could say that for all the major cities across the province. So from a consumer branding point of view, really hard to build something and then drive it as uniquely Canadian. Because ultimately, if you're going to build it and drive it, you want to reach that American consumer. And when you do that, you're not standing up saying, "Oh, look, Tim Hortons Make Believe." And Tim Hortons done a great job. But the life cycle of their product it depends on how hungry you are.
Right.
And it isn't something that is necessarily an investment that lasts. If you're investing in that product, you're gonna get sick. You got to eat it right away.
Very true.
Yeah.
It's not like a ton of R&Ds going into the next phone that you're going to have in your pocket for the next 18 months or something, right? It's completely different.
We changed the world with AI and machine learning. I don't know that others wouldn't have got there anyway. But I think we could have said that about any major invention that has a real wide appeal. We mapped the human genome.
Right.
25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. This is, 25 years ago, more. 1997, I think. this is a hell of a team that we've got here. But I don't know what league we play in sometimes. You got to know, like you're building a baseball team, you can't go play in the NFL.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Indeed. When you were talking about during the COVID period,
Yeah.
going to the manufacturers and asking if they can switch something up, that was at the time one of the probably biggest peacetime mobilizations of industrial capacity for a certain specific purpose. Was it fairly easy to get people to come along? Did people see the urgency? They didn't need to be that convinced, or were there like some? Because we hear it from the outside, but were there some challenges behind the scenes that that just never made it to the surface? That this was more difficult than we would have been led to believe it was.
I'll tell you a little anecdote how it started. It's the weekend of March 14th, 15th of 2020. I'd just come back from New York, maybe on the 12th or 13th, right as New York was shutting down, like Indiana Jones rolling out under the door.
Right.
I drove from Toronto to Niagara to coach some baseball. On the way back, I got a call from the Deputy Minister of Economic Development in Ontario, a guy named Giles Gerson, who's now running Toronto Region Board of Trade, and he said, we got a real problem. We can't source anything. And I wonder whether in your network you know anybody that makes this type of stuff. Now, I've been hearing for the last few days that the UK and China specifically were doing export controls. The whole world's falling apart for everybody. Why would I let N95 masks and ventilators go? New York, you're short on ventilators, just like in Lombardy, Italy. And people were passing away or going in makeshift morgues, like freezer trailers. It sounded like the end of the world. And I said to Giles, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can ask around, but typically you're either in automotive or you're not. So you're not on the side of making ventilators. I said, but if I could you get me the specs and the volumes, let's see. Now, on that Monday, I made a public call. I said, raise your hand. I had two sets of responses. One is auto suppliers, companies you don't know about, Mitchell Plastics in Kitchener. Never heard of them. Okay, but they make a dashboard and console and door cards for RAV4s and Ram trucks, two of the most popular. But once they get sold to the car company, you never see their name.
Right.
Guy who runs the shop says, oh, my sister's an emergency room nurse at St. Mike's Hospital in Toronto. They don't have anything. I said, well, if I can get you the stuff, could you figure it out for me? He goes, well, I'm not even going to wait for you. I think I can get the specs for face shields, and we'll go from there. And I said, well, getting specs and being able to use are two different things. So let me work with Health Canada for certification. Let me work with ECDEV on getting some of the funding. And all the auto suppliers that I called, they just right away said, maybe they felt that like we were in this generational calamity. They're like, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. Tell me this stuff can't be that hard. And then everybody else saying this guy's nuts. Like I'm watching the news and I'm watching people who I've never met say, he doesn't know how complicated a ventilator is. I'm like, have you ever driven a car? That's an air pump. Right. Yeah, this is we make $30,000, $40,000, $100,000 contraptions. It took 2 or 3 weeks of around the clock calling medical device companies and convincing them, look, nobody wants to be in your business, period. Let's work out a commercial arrangement where we borrow your IP. We do some contract manufacturing so that you can get through this incredible surge of demand. You own the IP. Want a royalty? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Government's going to pay for everything. We need it or we're going to die. And PPE suppliers were very open to the discussion. I mean, they were a little bit like, who's this guy? They probably had to do some due diligence for a while. And then,
of course.
And then I had to match them to people. They're like, okay, well, yeah, okay, maybe I agree to this, but what can Woodbridge Foam do in this space? If I'm going to lend you the IP, you can't do something wrong in our space. And so, but the ventilator companies all kind of told me no. And One of them said, "Stay in your lane. We're going to ramp up production. What you don't know is that in 2-3 months, the demand's going to crash." And I said, "Well, you don't know is I don't care.
Right.
And you can't make it. And if you say no to me, that's okay. That's your prerogative. But I reserve the right to tell everybody you said no."
Yeah.
And I told everybody, man. That list of newspapers you said I talked to, I told them all.
Yep.
So we put some pressure on them. Eventually, we found a couple. We made ventilators. We made gowns, masks, face masks. Face shields.
Right.
And we made the testing. I worked with Harvard Medical, who guys at Harvard are like, "Okay, show me that you can. Show me you have the capacity." And so we listed a bunch of companies that are in very intricate plastic parts. Show me that you have the backing of Health Canada, which we did. I got to give credit to both the provincial and the federal government. Man, did they rally to this effort? It was almost immediate. Yeah, immediate.
Well, it was one of those things where the federal public service and the provincial public servants, when something needs to be done right away.
Yeah.
Like it's like drop everything, make this happen. And they did it. And I mean, you gotta salute that, man, because we all thought the world was going to end. And everybody stepped up and did their part. It really was a unique time that I hope we don't ever experience again, to be honest with you.
I got to know Doug Ford really well then, and Chrystia Freeland, who I had known certainly through the NAFTA renegotiations. And Doug Ford was not a popular politician in this province at the time. There was something about this challenge that kind of woke up that leader in him. And I started having the same conversations with them at Chrystia, because of course she was leading a response. And the premier, who had kept a really tight reins on it here. And we just kind of started having those 3-way conversations. And then they started having the 2-way conversations, which was even better. And they created a partnership of trust that bled into all of these great automotive deals that we made after the pandemic. They trusted each other through a really tough period. We do this in Canada when the world is on fire. We're in. Everybody forgets about all the provincial bullshit that we have amongst each other, small p provincial.
The little silly stuff, right?
Yeah. Like if we got a brand, and if you're a student of history, we were in World War I before the Americans were.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Certainly as part of the Commonwealth, but certainly as one of the bookends of that effort. And the same thing in World War II. And the Korean War, Afghanistan, peacekeeping,
Mm-hmm.
the crisis resolution in the Suez Canal, also in the former Yugoslavia. You can count on us. And what's happened since the pandemic is a whole bunch of that. I don't know if you can swear on this podcast.
Yes, you can. Feel free.
A whole bunch of that shitty fucking undercurrent. Excuse, I went all the way with that one.
Go ahead.
You don't take away my freedoms. When you were free to say, "Don't take away my freedoms," has turned into the runaway political feeling of like, nothing. I can't trust anything you say. I can't trust you because you're in government. You're taking away my rights to feel a certain way. You can do anything you want. But it is everything we came together on has the same momentum to split us apart right now. And that's not just Canada. It's an unfortunate aftershock of the pandemic. And then we made some tough decisions in Canada from a fiscal point of view to try to keep as many people afloat during the pandemic. Those are the same people that say, "I can't trust you." Well, you had served checks, didn't you? Didn't you trust those checks?
Yeah, that's the one that kills me.
Yeah,
they went over budget. They went this. I go, yeah.
You
didn't you cash your serve check?
yeah. And then the war in Ukraine was
Yeah.
A terrible moment, but also really a disruptive moment economically around the world. So now we've got deficits, we've got inflation, and those people who did not do anything for anybody during the pandemic are the ones that say to you, see, you can't trust the government. Look what they did to your finances. Look what they did to you. And now you can't even talk to people. In those first few months,
Everybody was working together.
Yeah, they were pouring their hearts out to each other in public.
Yeah.
I remember. I won't forget.
Yeah, I remember too. I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah.
We are watching our premiers sort of freelance and go off in different directions and negotiate in public and play big cards early and tip their hand. And you were in the room. Like, if you had to grab everybody in a huddle, it's like, what would you tell them right now?
Wow. Well, first of all, I was in the room next door, because this is an important point. The federal government is the only people who can be in the room and on the table.
Right.
But I'm saying that to clarify for what you're saying.
Yes.
You know, there's a political vacuum in Ottawa right now for all the stuff that all of us know about. And you've got some very strong premiers, including the one in Queen's Park, who've got a really big stake in all of this. From 2017 to 2019, when we were renegotiating the NAFTA, it's very clear that the only people at the table were the federal government. So if you wanted to work on Team Canada, you could bring everything you had: networks, insight, strategy, guesswork. Leave your ego at the door, sit in a room, conservatives, liberals, NDP, labor. Like, I worked so closely with Jerry Dias at Unifor that people mistook us for each other.
Well, that's
yes.
At the beginning, yes, because as soon as I just said auto manufacturers, and I'm thinking auto workers in my head, and then I said, like, no, you're the, because but it was almost like you were doing labor relations at the same time.
No question, and he was doing a lot of negotiations that were very good, ultimately, for Canadian suppliers.
Right.
And so all of us dropped our egos, got to the table, and said, okay, federal government, at the moment that you negotiate, you're sitting across from the Americans and the Mexicans. This is what you can bring. And what the federal government did differently at that time than the previous government did on the Trans-Pacific Partnership was, and I give this credit to Chrystia Freeland. She came in, she said, you were unhappy during TPP. I know about this because I read it on the front page of the Globe and Mail. And I said, well, in Canada, what we normally do is governments put stakeholders under NDA, and they say, you can't talk about that you're talking to us. And you can't talk publicly if you want to be in the know. And we don't negotiate in public. And we ended up with a pretty shitty deal. And I was pretty clear about that. And I said that to her. And I said, I just want to do what the Mexicans do. They do something called the room next door, which is, you're going to come to every round. We're going to meet before, during, after. And as there are proposals and counter proposals, you're using direct stakeholder input to give the maximum punch for Canadian negotiations. And we did that. Now, some of us also spoke publicly because we don't work for the government. And the Canadian suppliers have 156 plants in the U.S., 120 in Mexico. So there were investors and employers in Mexico and the U.S. So I have my own White House meetings. I had my own Palacio Nacional meetings. The message was really all the same there. The way the industry's been set up, you can't hurt Canada without hurting yourself. You can't hurt Mexico without hurting yourself. And we're all supposed to be competing with China. Now, that's just one slice. There's so many other people involved in those negotiations. Premiers fed through either directly or through the first minister's table into the Canadian negotiating schedule. Right now, what we're seeing in Ottawa is, of course, a lot of this, I'll call it typical political drama, because even though it's atypical in the moment,
right,
this is a government in its 10th year.
Mm-hmm.
This is a prime minister who's won 3 times. So, tell me the last guy that won 4 times. There's a couple of examples.
Yeah, Laurier.
Right, yeah. It's not even Laurier. Laurier lost. Right, we all think that. That's how.
It wasn't.
That's true.
Yeah, he lost an election, ironically, on free trade, and so Mackenzie King, by the way.
Oh, was King, okay.
Yeah, and even Pierre Trudeau, who was the prime minister for 16 years, well, he lost in '79 to Joe Clark, and he was on his way out, and the Clark government lost the confidence vote before they could pick a leader, and the wind changed, and he got another term out of it. Now, in this vacuum, we're seeing especially 2, maybe 3 premiers. Ontario, who's invested heavily in automotive, like put his money where his mouth is, feeling like I need to defend that, and I'm going to say things to defend that because of the drama in government right now. No one's saying that part. Mm-hmm. Danielle Smith, who probably is a bit of a closer political cousin to the incoming government, probably thinks that she might have her own path there. 60% of oil imports into the U.S. comes from Alberta, and you've got Legault, who is in trouble locally and needs to look like Captain Quebec.
Yeah.
And probably less of that would be happening if we had a stable political situation with the governing party in Ottawa. Mm-hmm. I've said to everybody, I did 35 interviews in 26 hours across North America, every single outlet possible, and it was a marathon. I enjoyed it because I said to every one of them, I go, patience.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the president. We don't know what are you going to use? An executive order? Are you going to use emergency legislation? What other fights are you going to pick? Everybody calm down.
That's kind of what we've been saying. Just relax. Until something happens, don't panic.
Yeah, yesterday he said he's going to take over the Panama Canal. You take it on the president of Panama.
He's talking about Greenland today again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, he's going to set 100 fires. So let's see what January 21st looks like before, like you said, we negotiate away in public, or we show them cracks in the federation.
Or throw Mexico under the bus, who we might need in a 2-in-1 situation.
Oh my God, please don't even start with me on Mexico. I said in Mexico, just in our business, never mind the rest of Canadian interest, just the one that I know about. We've got 120 plants in Mexico for Canadian suppliers. And so if you cut off Mexico, you're cutting off the lifeblood for the health of some of these suppliers. And people say, well, why did you invest in Mexico? I said, well, because automakers stopped investing in Canada. And so if you're a Canadian auto parts supplier, you have to follow your customer, and your customer says, we're going to make pickup trucks in Coahuila. You want that contract, set up a plant here. If you don't want it, no problem. Mm-hmm. Well, we've reversed the investment trend over the last 2 years, but the last 20 years has been done that way. So don't say cut them off until you understand. What you might do is cut the legs out from under the Canadian industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cutting off your nose to spite your face, right?
Yeah. Cutting off your head to spite
literally.
Yeah.
That's a better analogy, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Thank you for saying that.
I mean, never mind I get paid to say that, but I believe it. So,
well, and it's like you just said, there are other things at play here that so many people don't know about. Like the company you talked about that manufactured dashboards for trucks and for Toyotas, for Ford and Toyota. Was it Ford and Toyota?
Yeah, the Toyota and Ram.
Toyota and Ram. Never heard of that company before in my life. Now, here's the other thing, though. Yep. I know that Kitchener-Waterloo used to be a massive manufacturing area where you could get everything. And a lot of that base still resides and lives there. But they make things that you and I mean, the average person, wouldn't have a clue about.
Yeah.
And if they have, like you say, a secondary plant in Mexico so that they can maintain that contract with whatever company, all of those companies will have to do that. So It's like when somebody said, we need to cancel the F-35. A friend of mine who was in a high-ranking position in the military at the time, he's since retired, had told me, we cannot do that. He goes, there are 150,000 manufacturing jobs in Canada for parts supply for that machine. We help develop it. If we cancel it, we're killing all those jobs. We're pissing money away. You can't just say, do this. You have to know you have to look under the hood. Pardon the pun, but you have to look under the hood.
This is the madness.
You have to see the connections.
Yeah. This is the madness of Trumpism. Like, let's forget his motivations for the moment, because if you get me started, we'll go on for 2 hours. But
that's okay. We can do that.
Well, we could do another show.
I know you guys can. It's a binary look at a very complicated North America. Mm-hmm. Never mind the rest of the world. And so you say America first. What does that mean? When American companies have invested north of the border for 120 years in the auto business, and half of the cars we make are American, or that the U.S. military during a World War II effort heavily invested in smelter capacity for aluminum in Quebec and in Kitimat. Mm-hmm. And now the U.S. military relies on Canadian aluminum. How do you say we're going to cut them off? Yeah. How are you going to transition to electrification when all of the legacy car companies and consumers have to still operate an internal combustion, and where they're profitable, mm-hmm. slip into EVs where they're not? And in the interim, before you can get the stuff out of the ground in northern Quebec and Ontario, and lithium and cobalt and graphite, which, by the way, the Americans don't have.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have tons of it.
Yeah, you have to still rely on oil and gas in Alberta, which the Americans, for the most part, don't have. And, you like to eat fresh fruit. Well, mm-hmm. they're not growing any in California right now. We have a water problem mm-hmm. that is existential. But a lot of their fruit and vegetables come from Mexico. I always say to people that in the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen an explosion. Everybody's doing avocado toast. Everybody's got avocado this and avocado that, guacamole this, guacamole that. Well, you like it, do you? Well, we don't make them in Windsor.
No.
They come north. You're going to pay more? Or how much more can you pay? What if they say we're not sending it over? When you piss off Panama, mm-hmm. And you understand that the Chinese have invested $70 billion in expanding the infrastructure there, while the West decided, Washington decided, let's turn a blind eye to that right now because we got a lot of problems. And then you piss them off, and the Chinese start to flex a little bit at the same time. And all of those goods that come through the Pacific and up the eastern seaboard in the Atlantic come later and pricier. I mean, you're doing it to yourself. What's the mm-hmm. point?
And not to mention, what if Panama starts feeling unsafe and turns to China to start providing some military protection? China starts setting up some bases there or something. Do you really want to invite that? You got to think a little further.
Well, and how could we stop that? We couldn't.
We couldn't. We had Chinese military exercises last week encircling the island of Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe a lot of your listeners don't think about Taiwan or consider that a vital issue for them.
24 million people live there.
Yeah, but also most of the semiconductors that you get for everything, we're connecting through Taiwanese semiconductors here. The U.S. and Canada has specifically protected Taiwan's independence by running their Pacific fleets and Canadian frigates through the Straits of Taiwan. The Chinese are not terribly concerned about that right now. Mm-hmm. They have put trillions in infrastructure initiatives around the world in countries that the West has considered secondary since the end of the Cold War. But the U.S. can't win a vote at the UN because China has invested in the Caribbean, Central America, South America, never mind everywhere else.
All throughout the African continent, all the rail lines they've built, throughout the African continent.
Yeah, to get cobalt out, and and yet we're dealing with a character right now who I keep telling people, why don't you just watch the Helsinki press conference in 2018? You can find it on YouTube between him and Putin.
That's
and
it.
Tell me that that's a normal relationship between an American president and the president of Russia.
No.
And so the real issue for Canadians as we consider our leadership, okay, this goes for everybody who supports every stripe, is are you prepared to consider a Canada with an isolationist USA? And what that means for our international relations, our foreign policy, our defense of our interests, whether those are physical defense or values defense, and a Trump USA that isolates itself, that punishes its allies on its way internally, never mind what he might do domestically, is going to create a different world for Canada. And you need to expect governments, all of them, but especially the federal government's ability to wade through that. That's unprecedented in modern history and likely going to happen. What's our relationship like with China if the U.S. isolates themselves from us? What's our relationship in the Arctic with the Russians? I don't know, but the point is, don't throw your vote away on stupid slogans. And if you do, and we're going to get a new government, Canadians should expect a lot from that government, and work with it. Like I'm going to work with it, regardless of what stripe it is. But we're in uncharted waters. We got to bone up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we seem to be having a technical glitch with Mr. Beaver there, so no problem. We'll just keep rolling on. He'll be back in a sec. My camera, for some reason, keeps going. The zoom keeps dropping on it. I have no idea what is going on.
I guess they know that we're on. So as we mentioned them, the
gremlins seem to creep in from elsewhere around the world to just take over the system.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. It's another... It's an extra Monday when you consider that... well, are you guys... You're not expecting the snow over the next 2 days, are you, in Toronto? Because we're getting 10 to 20 centimeters here in Canada's capital, which will make an interesting Christmas shopping blitz tomorrow, because it is the busiest shopping day of the year.
We're expecting a little bit tonight. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, I just went online earlier, and I was going to order a few things on Amazon, and I'm like, no, I think I'll be making a trip down to the Rideau Center, because it just said, don't expect anything tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's funny how we do this as a society. We already know that you're going to have a problem if you go shopping on the 23rd or the 24th. And
that's like what I
me. I know. There's a mall over here that's going to get converted. It's called Cloverdale Mall. I can see it. I'm pointing out my window. It's going to go to condos, and it's maybe the last Christmas season it's over. Sometimes I do the last day at work, shoot over there, 3 hours, see what you can shoehorn into your listing.
That's how I like to do it. And somebody said to me years ago, why? Isn't it stressful? I said, no, what is stressful is, years ago, my mother said, well, just why don't you start at the beginning of December? So I said, okay, I went out a couple of nights, first couple of days of December, couldn't see anything. Nothing jumped out at me off. Well, there was 3 nights that I wasted like 12 hours worth of, and then I did that for the next few weeks. I ended up buying everything on Christmas Eve in a 4-hour cycle. I was totally satisfied, and I said, that's it. I will stick to either the 23rd or 24th. I'm never going to do this, stretch it over. It was anxiety-inducing, not to mention the fact that if I heard one more Christmas song, I was going to punch somebody in the face.
Well, this is the Canadian thing, right? You're in crisis, under pressure, and you're making better decisions. That's what we do.
It's very true. See, my camera keeps popping out of a frame for some reason. Might be time to reboot my system, too. I haven't done it in a while, now that I think about it. So, it keeps going haywire. I don't know what is going on. I just updated the software, too. Weird.
It's still you. Looks like a 1970s TV effect.
Yeah. Well, what it does is it zooms out, and you can see. If I go out, you can see that's the edge. It's because my camera's behind the teleprompter.
Yep.
I don't have anything to read off the teleprompter, but I use it to it keeps going haywire here. I use it to monitor so that I can look directly into the camera, so it looks like I'm looking directly into your eyes. Is the idea behind it?
This is like the opening of the Brady Bunch, where they start with you and then they go into that corner and then the other corner.
Exactly. All right, let's bring them back in. I don't know what happened there. You went offline, and my camera went haywire at the same time.
You missed all the good stuff. Predicted lottery numbers, tariff rates, everything else.
That's not gonna work.
Well, I can sort of hear you, sir, but I don't know what's going on with your mic there. I do have a graph that I wanted to share, though.
Yeah, sure.
I have a graph that I wanted to share, and this shows, this on screen here, EV race by block. China is racing ahead on EV development. So EV share of total sales, a little over 40% in China, about 28% in Europe, and a little over 12% in the US. And when they show the comparative numbers, when it comes to sales, China's hitting 10 million in, that's as of 2024, this quarter, I guess. Yeah. End of 2024, they're hitting over 10 million. Europe's still under 4 million, and the US is just under 2. So it makes one wonder, as we slowly transition away from fossil fuel powered vehicles, and fossil fuels are not going away anytime soon. Oil will be prominent in our lives till well after we're buried.
Yep.
And somebody says, well, what do you mean? I thought we were getting rid of oil. No. We're going to get rid of oil when it comes to gas powered engines or internal combustion engines. We'll move to batteries for that, to transport things, which will be cleaner for air pollution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But oil is in everything, like this. This is
I'm not
petroleum.
getting in an electric airliner just yet.
Well, that's the other thing too. Yeah, I'm not sold on that idea just yet. Until you can make it so that the batteries have the same range as fuel, but weighs less than the fuel, which ain't happening anytime soon.
Yeah. Look, that graph is interesting for a couple of things. You'll see a point of departure around 2020.
Oh yeah, and I'll put it back up on the screen here, and you can really see it. They just explode.
Do you know the American bloc, the North American bloc, really was the leader in car manufacture for the better part of the 20th century, in terms of volume, quality, range of product.
Mm-hmm.
All based on oil, especially also cheap access to oil. And the price of a tank of a liter of gas in the U.S. is still demonstrably lower than Europe and other places. And yes, a lot of that is taxes that the other jurisdictions put on that the U.S. doesn't, but also really actually access to cheaper refined end product. The Europeans, especially led by the Germans, especially led by Volkswagen, 30 years ago made the decision to go diesel. And really most of the European jurisdictions, even prior to EU, they put an extra tax on any internal combustion engine that had a bigger than a 2-liter displacement. Now, what that does is everybody was driving around little boxes that didn't have a heck of a lot of power. But the way that diesel works is it gives you a lot of range and a lot of torque. And so you could have a diesel 2-liter engine that acts like a gas 3.5-liter engine, and it'll give you a range that is just
double.
Yeah, and
so it's insane. Yeah,
they bet on diesel. They did really well on diesel. The American penetration on diesel was low. Diesel's smelly.
It's dirty.
Visible effluent. And then Volkswagen got caught in Dieselgate.
Yes. Now they were all Wankel engines, were they not?
Well, no, a lot of that there was some at Opel, and then also Mazda did their version of it.
Yeah, the Rotax. Yeah.
But again, just trying to find a point of departure from what the Americans were dominating on. Well, the Chinese, who started in the industry when we decided to outsource in the late 90s and early 2000s, taught them how to make, what to make. We sent them, first time I was in China in 1997, I saw a Volkswagen product that was Frankenstein product, the front of a Jetta, the back of a Passat. And I understood, oh, right, we're just the tooling that we had when it was at the end of its life cycle, they put it in China.
Right.
And the Chinese, as they started to develop their own domestic brands in the early to mid 2000s, started by ripping off global brands. And, we thought, oh, let's teach them a little bit about IP. There's a company called Chery, Chery, that copied Chevy cars. And, there's a lot of examples. BYD, the first cars that they showed at the Detroit Auto Show in 2008, a car called the FE3 was a ripoff of the previous decade's Toyota Corolla.
Okay.
They ripped off. And their government said, how do you like them apples? But
what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it? But Shenzhen was becoming, like you said earlier in the podcast, the global center for electronics manufacture.
Yeah.
And, with electronics come batteries.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chinese said, like I say the Chinese like they're an entity, because they are. And the Americans are not. They're publicly traded companies, and the Europeans are not, and the Japanese are not. But China said, well, we're not going to compete on internal combustion. We're not going to compete on diesel. We're going to compete on electric.
Mm-hmm.
And so they bet completely on electric. And I know that everybody thinks that electric cars are much more technologically advanced than internal combustion. But from an engineering point of view, they're not.
Really. They're a lot less so, actually, I would say.
Yeah, it's a spinning electromagnet. And at the beginning of the auto business in the early 2000s, in the early 1900s, the New York City cab company in the teens was running electric cars.
Mm-hmm.
And the distribution network and infrastructure for gas beat out electric lead acid batteries. So what happened is world falls apart 2020. Borders close. There is an incredible increased demand in electronics. The auto sector says, we're not making cars. 60 days around the world, nobody made cars except for the Chinese. They said, well, we're going to let go of all of the supply that they get, which as sophisticated as the sensors and the cameras and the semiconductors that run all of those systems. The Chinese didn't. The Chinese also turned internally, pushed hard for domestic demand for their own vehicles, and their own vehicles were electric. So you see a lot of that Chinese curve.
Oh yeah,
is a series of bets that paid out based on acting against WTO rules,
mm-hmm.
especially as it comes to IP, and then the pandemic closed factories around Western factories, but kept the Chinese domestic market going for itself. And so you can't change any of that. The reality is they're way ahead. But
I watched a
irrepeatable business model. You can't.
Oh yeah,
You
No,
can't do what they
absolutely.
did because it just happened.
Well, you're right, and it's not. You don't want to have to
Right.
go through another global pandemic. Let's do that again.
Yeah, let's try it.
I watched a couple of documentaries recently. I watch a few different YouTube travel channels about places in the world that I've yet to go, because I love to travel and I'll go wherever I can, whenever I can. But I watched one recently on a guy went to Chongqing and then he went to Guangzhou. These are two very, very big cities that most people outside of that part of the world don't even know exist, right?
Yeah.
I think there's 24 million in Chongqing and about 18 or 22 million in Guangzhou. And he was saying that something like 90% of the vehicles there are electric.
Yep.
And that's for everybody, like from scooters to motorcycles to rickshaws to delivery vehicles to personal vehicles. 90 to 95% are electric. And they've noticed that since switching to electric, Chongqing used to have terrible air pollution. Again, It's 24 million people into a pretty condensed area.
Yeah.
Their air quality index is gone. It flipped around completely.
I visited both those cities.
Mm-hmm.
Spent a lot of time in Guangzhou because Canadian companies like Nortel were heavily invested in Guangzhou, partnered with the university there. A lot of what happens with the Chinese, or used to happen, especially with the Chinese in Western partners when we trusted them. Is a lot of that Nortel IP leaked into Guangzhou and then came back out as Huawei. But if you went there in the previous decades, 10, 20, 30 years ago, as I did, what you saw was a society that was heavily reliant on bicycles for transportation. It's like a flock of birds, like a school of fish that started to buy Western brands, those Frankenstein monsters I told you about. And over the last 10, 20 years, also started to see a real rise in the middle class, per capita GDP, where they become consumers. And the price points that get there for them are the domestic brands. If you're making $10,000 a year, or $15,000 or $20,000 a year, you're not looking at Mercedes S-classes. And the local brands at that price, nickel cadmium batteries, Toyota Corolla ripoffs like those FE3s, a very, very important domestic turbo boost for those companies. And the one thing that I try to remind everybody is that electric cars are 400 and 800 volt platforms. Internal combustion engine cars are 40 volt platforms. So they platform an incredible amount of technology in the same physical space. And the Chinese have an incredible pipeline exposure, domestic innovation in all kinds of mobility technologies. They also have a culture. So these technologies, the value in those technologies isn't, hey, we get to play with some other features in the cars. It's the data is the new oil.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Sensors that face the customer, that face the road, cameras that they're creating an incredible databases of geospatial information, but also personal information. You land in the airport in Shanghai, all of the technology that's pointed at you, everybody knows where you are, where you're headed, who you are, etc. Well, we have different privacy culture here in Canada and different privacy laws. You couldn't platform those things. The state there is a state that watches you.
Oh, constantly, 24/7.
Yeah, the car brands, the domestic ones, are state owned. The value of information is incredible, and the state says, "Hey, by the way, here's a subsidized BYD Dolphin for $15,000." But everybody knows they're being watched.
Yeah. Is it 15? I thought they were selling that for 4,500. The Dolphin.
Yeah, maybe at home. Maybe.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and what was it? Samsung just developed a new. You can get a little hiccup there, sir. I'm going to put you on mute for a sec. They just developed a new solid state battery that I'm told gives you 1,000 kilometers of range. And can go from 0 to 80% in 12 minutes. Which is astonishing tech. And it's like, this is the game changer. I'm like, yeah, but this is the first step in the game changer. Because what's the next generation and the generation after that?
Yeah, this is where the milk gets in the coconut. Range anxiety means something at 100 kilometers, 200, 300. Means nothing at 1,000. Like, please give me 1,000.
Exactly.
But also,
no, that's just it, right?
Quick charging. So what happens?
1,000 kilometers range. I mean, like, I used to have a Honda Civic. I sold it a little over a year ago because my job had changed and I didn't need a car anymore. But I used to be able to go to Toronto from Ottawa, and I could drive. I'd drive right around the 110 max. I'm not a speed demon, and I'm trying to conserve fuel because the money's coming out of my pocket. I could go to Toronto and back, one tank, 750. So I couldn't get all the way home on a single tank. But that's really good mileage. But if you give me 1,000 kilometers range, that's Toronto and back.
You're not even going to worry about it.
No, you won't even think about it.
Yeah. I flew to Germany on business. We had to go meet Volkswagen. They're in Wolfsburg. I landed in Frankfurt. It's 375 kilometers away. You couldn't get a rental car unless you rented electric, and we ended up choosing an electric vehicle. It was a really nice product, but it was a city electric car. Its range when I got in at 100% was 320 kilometers, and I thought, okay, shit, now I have to find a spot to charge, and Germany is full of spots to charge.
Oh, yeah.
But I had 4 adults in there. We were on the Autobahn. We stopped 2 times before we made the trip. And 2 things came out of that. We all kind of agreed that, well, I guess you could do this in Germany if you wanted to, or in countries like that where the infrastructure is there, although it was terribly inconvenient. But you couldn't drive that car in a place like Canada unless you lived in Toronto and you don't leave Toronto for any reason. And we're not there yet, but 1,000 kilometers, quick charging, and by the way, at around the same price as a regular vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
exactly.
We're at the point of no return on EVs. It's going to take a long time before it's, 100%. It may never happen, but we're not going back. And 30-40% of the vehicles in 2035, 10 years from now, are going to be pure battery electric, and everything else going to have some electrification.
Yeah, and it's. I remember when people first talked about we need to go to electric cars, and I'm going back 20 years ago, and I'm like, dude, the infrastructure's not there. Yeah. There's no charging stations. You know how long it's going to take to build that out? Look at how long it took to build the petrol distribution system, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But it got built quicker than I thought it would. I mean, there's still a lot to do. You can drive coast to coast in Canada in a Tesla.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Is it
Tesla? Easy? No, but only in a Tesla, right? Yeah. Because it will bring you to the Tesla charging, the supercharging stations. For any other electric vehicle, you might be a little bit harder pressed to do coast to coast. But something I've noticed, Ottawa, Canada's capital, right? Shouldn't we be the bright shining beacon on the hill of electric? There's almost no electric charging stations in this city. Yeah. Kingston has more than Ottawa does.
Yeah.
Kingston's 150,000 people. Ottawa-Gatineau is 1.6 million, and yet there's way more charging stations available all throughout Gatineau and the Quebec side than there is in Ottawa. Like, what is going on?
Yeah. Well, that's the bottleneck, isn't it? So until we solve that, and being in the charging business is tough too. If you want to be an independent company, once again, in the charging business, you've got to buy hardware. You've got to hope that the customers show up, and you got to hope that that hardware works and lasts enough that you amortize it for cheaper than what you bring in. And right now, it's we're in that messy middle. And when people talk right now about, I don't know, the EV business, I always say we're plateauing in EVs. We're not declining. Any transition is going to be really tough. We're just tough right now, but it's a superior product.
It is a superior product, and it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay for sure. Is it practical in every part of the country? Goodness no. If you live in northern Alberta or northern Saskatchewan or northern Ontario, it's not practical.
Yeah, you'll never transition then, but that's fine.
That's fine. That's fine. That's not where the bulk of the vehicles are in this country, right? Yeah. That's fine. It's the major urban areas where you need to get them onto electrification so that we can reduce pollution, we can reduce consumption, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're going to get there in our lifetime. I'm 56. I am still astonished at the fact that I have all access to human information right here. I'm living in the future, man. Yeah.
You had that when you were a kid. If you saw that,
when
you were 10, wouldn't you lose your mind?
Science fiction.
I'll give you one little anecdote before I got to go here. That same year where I saw that Testarossa, I broke my arm, and then I got a blood infection. I had to stay at Sick Kids for 3 weeks. While I'm at Sick Kids, the kid who's sharing a room with me had just come back from Expo 86 in Vancouver, and he had this little thing. It looked like a TV remote control, but it had a screen on it. He was putting in these little cartridges, and he was watching cartoons on the display. It blew my mind.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
What is this thing?
Yeah.
I said, I just came back from Expo 86. I don't know who his parents were. It wasn't something they were handing out at the door, but it was one of his parents was in that business. And I never got that out of my head. I'm like, Jesus, like that would be the greatest thing that ever happened to me, if I could get one of those, trying to explain this to my parents, or like, okay, well, we don't even let you watch TV because you're supposed to be doing homework. Now you're going to carry around the TV. And now, we got these, and like, I try not to be old school with my kids and say, like your parents are probably the same as mine. Not too much TV time. Don't get too close to the TV. Mm-hmm. It's going to rot your brain.
Yeah.
It's like, do the kids these days stand a chance? Why wouldn't I? The curiosity, innocent curiosity, if it could be directed in the right way, the access to information they have, they'll save us all. Or they'll burn it down, right?
Well, what was it? Who was it said, that every village had an idiot, and the internet was the one that got them all together.
Oh, God, that's a good one. I like it.
I think it was Norman Schwarzkopf who said that. I could be incorrect, but either way, it's an accurate one, because we thought giving everybody access would make us all smarter.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the case.
No, not all of us. I'll tell you that.
All right, sir. I understand you have to go.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think Mr. Beaver had a technical glitch on his end, but no worries. I'll reach out to him afterwards. But thank you very much for your time. This has been a really wonderful chat. We'd love to have you back again when you have another chance to come in and just shoot the breeze with us. It's something we love to do. And just to heads up, once a month we do a live pubcast where we go into the Lieutenant's Pump here in downtown Ottawa, and we do a live broadcast, and we have people come in from all over the country, and they'll jump in. Some people will join us live on site. And in the pubcast, we don't talk politics, we don't talk religion, we just talk about travel stories, jokes, life, things like that. So if you ever want to join us for a pubcast on a Saturday afternoon, we have a couple of pints of Guinness, have a bite to eat, and just shoot the shit.
That sounds like a lot more fun, and I'm in Ottawa a lot, so I may have to take you up on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just reach out, man. Anytime. Yeah. I'm like 200 meters from the front door of the pump. So
wow. No, that sounds like a lot of fun. And look, and I appreciate being on, and your format. I love this. Get to just talk a little bit. I just did a hit before this, and it was 7 or 8 minutes of talking. I'm sure you'll see 20 seconds of it on the national broadcast tonight.
Yeah.
You gotta let this. We got to do more of this in life. We've got to let the conversations breathe. Otherwise, those 20-second hits are going to kill us.
I agree. And I was evidenced by that a few weeks ago, just before the beer became legal to sell in corner stores. I was interviewed on the street. I had 5 minutes of things to say. I think it was 12 seconds that showed on the news.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to give them room to breathe. All right, sir. I thank you very much again for your time. We really do appreciate you. We'll reach out, and we'll get back in touch with you again. And hey, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Thanks. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao.
All right, that was our friend Flavio Volpe. What a heck of a nice guy, and I really enjoyed that conversation. And somebody who lives, breathes, and works in an industry that supports hundreds of thousands of jobs, and talks about some of the efforts that they put forth to make sure that we were safe at a time when we needed Canadians to come together. And they were able to do it because we remembered what it was like to be part of community. And as you all know here at the ZAMP fam, you guys are all part of our community, and we appreciate and love and respect each and every one of you. So thanks for coming out. Thanks for watching us today. It is the Christmas Eve show. I don't know where my Santa hat is, but I think we're going to record something for the Christmas morning show, and it might be a little bit more relaxed and probably less political. It might be almost pub-like, but don't quote me on that. I don't know where Mr. Beaver is. I seem to have lost him altogether. I'm not even getting him on his phone right now, so he might have had a major technological catastrophe, and that does sometimes happen, but that's okay. So thanks again to our sponsors, the Mystery Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, CanadianTarot.com, and the Peppermaster. They've been with us since the beginning. We really do appreciate each and everything they do for us and how they've supported us from the beginning. Of course, if you want to find us online, you can reach out to us at our pod page, which is at podpage.com / The True North Eager Beaver, with a hyphen between each one of those words. It is scrolling across the bottom of the screen, or you can scan the QR code. Of course, that is sponsored by the Ray Girl. The Ray Girl sponsors our pod page, and we thank you. We really do, because it's a chunk of change that I really couldn't afford to cover. And now that I don't have a job, this is my only line of work, if you want to call it work. There's no income. So anyway, if you want to follow us, you can follow us at podpage.com / The True North Eager Beaver, with a hyphen in between each word. Or if you like, you can also donate some money to us at our coffee page. That's ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver. You can even scan the QR code in the top corner here where I'm pointing to right now if you're watching on the feed or listening on the audio. It is ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver. You can donate there. You can also donate in Super Chat on YouTube when you're watching this if you want. We do get all the money. Well, it's, everybody keeps their portion, of course, but I believe we get more from coffee. I'm not even sure anymore. I'm just happy that you folks are here to help us out on the daily, and you join us each and every morning, Monday to Friday, when we sometimes have lots to say and sometimes we struggle. Myself mostly is the struggle because I don't sleep anymore, and I'm kind of an old crusty grizzly bear. So with that being said, I will bid you adieu. I do not have an Easter egg, but I do have this. My word of wisdom for you is to have a safe and happy holiday. And I hope that even if you don't celebrate, that you do have a chance to spend some time with people that you love and care for. You don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be somebody who celebrates Christmas to enjoy the season and spend time with friends and family, or maybe even colleagues. I don't know, whatever the case may be. Enjoy yourselves. Merry Christmas. See you soon. Bye.
You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Misfit Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters, CanadianTarot.com, their uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from farm-fresh ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. We are grateful to the Crier Media Network for its support, Pete Jarvis for our artwork, and Paul Joseph Something for our opening and closing sequence music.